Okay, welcome back to I think edition 4, is it? We had half term last week, so we both got distracted. um so in fact not last week, the week before. Anyway, we're back here and we have a little insight into this week's training, a bit of an admission on my part about the previous
Yeah.
week. And then we have a question from Rach to go through. So, how's your week been so far, Fletch?
So far, good. My half term was last week, so we've come out the back of that having completed very little and trying to now make up for it.
Good. So we'll get my admission out of the way. So when we went through last time and went through the call, I managed to fail to mention to Fletch that I actually had a race on the Sunday.
Not just a
So it
race.
wasn't a big race. It wasn't a big race, which is why I didn't have it in my kind of plan. But yeah, a group of us went out to Paris and we did the Ekiden, which is a like a relay. Well, it is a relay. In this case, as a marathon distance as a relay. Great fun and a chance to, I guess, run quickly. Which ironically, I remember I stood on the start line. I've never run a 10K as a race. I've never run a 5K as a race. So it was. I was like, I'm normally I have a bit of like a sort of like a warm up, like maybe a marathon to warm up and then
Yeah.
get going. So, um, but great fun and actually a really good way of seeing a city that way. So it was good fun. So yeah, my training plan on Sunday diverged slightly.
Yeah, so there's a Thursday evening message saying, "Oh, by the way, I'm running a 5K race. How can we adapt my long run?"
Well, we
Uh,
had an injury. We had a couple of injuries in the setup with two teams. We had a couple of injuries, so I ended up doing two legs. So I did a 10K, like a flat out 10K and a flat out 5K. So I called that my Sunday run. So
there
there
we
we are.
go. There we go.
Yeah. So anyway, back to it now. Back to the normal plan. We're Wednesday, so I'm one session in to my double session day. So um, let's have a little look at what we've got on for this week.
Yeah, for sure. So this week we kind of building on the 3K reps that you did that you loved. I heard everyone else heard too.
I did love them. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're building on that now to start to flesh out more volume. I still want to ring fence those recovery days as much as we can, which I think is what we're going to be talking about in a minute anyway. But I really want to be able to ring fence those recovery days off as much as possible and just start to stack volume on top of the other days. So we're going to keep Monday relatively easy. We're going to build the volume up on the harder days. The 2x8 that you've got later on today, we're going to start to build that volume up as well. That is very much guised around VO2 max training. So I think a lot of people will use that sort of Norwegian 4x4 method to work on, but actually stretching it out to longer times, 8, 16 minutes worth of stuff, you really start to get in that zone for a longer period of time. The pace isn't as high, and that's the beauty of it in some ways. Actually, it's probably just above threshold pace, but because of the time that you're there for, you don't get that steady state anymore. You just exponentially keep on increasing that oxygen consumption as the time goes on. So you can get into zone, I wouldn't say easy, but probably a little bit easier perceptively than the sort of like 2 minutes and 4 minute reps that we've kind of built on. But actually has a much more significant improvement on VO2 max because you're in that zone for a sustained period of time. And you can really build volume up this way. So 4 times 8 reps, 4 times 8 minute reps, sorry, building up to then eventually, there's some crazy sessions that we could throw into it if we're tolerant of it. You can get 32 minutes in zone very, again, easily is not the word that we would naturally use, but with some major effort, but 32 minutes at that zone, you have to do so much more on the rep side of things at a higher pace to get that from other sessions that we've done. So that's why we're moving in that angle. I've kept the distance the same for the first one, but what you'll notice is there's actually a progression run there. So we've actually adapted, and whether you saw that or not, this is fresh from the
Yeah.
face of Ben. But we're going to do a 5K progression, and every 5K we just jump it up by 15 minutes per kilometer. So we're going to be ending relatively strong now, having started relatively, thanks to your recent test, relatively easy. So build, 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 negative split the run, get used to that incremental increase in speed, and then boom, recover.
Yeah.
Distance wise, no different. And that's kind of how we can then sort of chop up those sessions. But then we are going a bit longer now on the long Sunday run. So after about 10 minutes of warming up, with that warming up, we want to start doing some of the drill work as well, some of the plyometric stuff, some of the hopping, skipping, sidestepping kind of exercises, and then 25Ks worth of paced work. And
Skipping. Are you hoping I don't fall over as I try and do these?
my client
I'm a
did say to me at
one-trick
the time,
pony here. I can
yeah.
run. I can run in a straight line.
Well, we're of a similar-ish height, and my client this morning, in person, I was demonstrating a skip, and he thought he was funny by saying, "I've never seen a giraffe skip before." Cheeky sod.
Yeah. So I think yeah, I mean, I'll absorb your comment about the easy 32-minute interval. But I guess, if I think to Sunday in Paris, I set off and yeah, the first 10K, the 10K one, I was doing, I guess, I think I've averaged at 4:10 or something. Um, for 10K, which I wasn't expecting. Yeah, I guess the point is now I'm learning, or I'm understanding more that I can hold these paces for longer. I still remember back to the first time you ever set an interval session, and I was like, how can I possibly repeat that pace just with 2 minutes break? Um, and you can, because you don't need much. Yeah, the point is the level this is at. You don't need much recovery time to just like clear out and reset totally. So you get this benefit that and like whoever for our enormous subscriber base, whoever's looking at these numbers, of course, these are all numbers relative to my threshold rate, right? Pace, not everybody's.
Yeah.
But the point is, when you do them at that pace, they work in 2 minutes, and you can do the second one. I guess if you're going too fast relatively, when you have your 2 minute break, you won't be ready for the second one in the same way as if they're at the wrong pace. The wrong pace.
Yeah, and that's sometimes where with interval training, it's kind of labeled as the intensity is the most important factor. And eventually it is, but actually it's completing the reps is the earliest thing to achieve. If you can hit that first speed, that first rep, hit the recovery, and then repeat that same performance again, it means that you recovered. And therefore, the intensity wasn't so high that you had to bounce up from having only come down halfway. And that's kind of where we will look at some things. Okay, well, you managed to achieve 3 reps of that at the perfect pace, and then you died off. Oh, okay, cool. Well, that's something to factor in. That 3 reps was your tolerance level, and then you fatigued. Well, then that's a way of measuring one session versus another one. In next
Yeah.
time you've got, I'm going to move at the same time. Next time you've got a workout to do that's very similar, you have to judge it based on apples versus apples and not judging oranges versus apples. So a 4-minute workout versus a 8-minute workout is not going to work.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I would say you probably notice it more on a hill session, because the kind of cliff edge is a bit more immediate. Like in a flat pace session, you just slow down a bit. Whereas on a hill session, it's a bit more like bang, you've like hit some sort of.
Yeah, no,
That's
exactly
how
that.
Okay, cool. Well, we're so that's this week. With no races. I've got no races this weekend. There's no surprises coming up.
You sure?
So yeah. Well, not I'm aware of anyway. So cool. So we have a question. It's very exciting. We've had questions from each of our listeners so far.
Way.
So this question comes from Rach. So there's a couple of bits in the question. So I'll class it as her one question, but there's a few questions in here. So one we touched a little bit on last week, but we'll keep it in there as relevant. So here's the question. So any kind of training program, probably from a marathon distance upwards, requires a significant weekly time commitment. For an ultra run of this distance, I guess referring to, either Daytona or Badwater, the need to build the incremental fitness gains as well as avoid injury clearly commands a rigorous schedule. How do you manage time with the inevitable family demands as well as full-time jobs um, to protect the progress you need to make? Is it important to factor in specific and mindful rest days? And then the kind of follow up question to that is, how important is your diet and nutritional intake for this training? Is the nutritional plan as important as the physical training? So, a couple of questions. One, the juggle, um,
Yeah.
and then sort of rest days and nutrition.
Yeah, I think the significant yeah. There's the significant time dedicated to training is an interesting topic right now because I think we've discussed a little bit of this before in regards to what's always been done isn't always the best way of doing it. And how people have approached the marathon before has always been volume and getting in as many miles, kilometers as possible. Some people have only got 2 or 3 hours of training a week that they can dedicate to it, and they still want to do big things with that. Can you train for a marathon on 3 hours a week? I do believe that you can, and some people probably a lot more than others. I think there's definitely a genetic factor to that. We've discussed how you don't seem to get too damaged by running before, therefore you can accumulate volume. But also, there's the people that can get away with doing a lot less and actually have an underlying genetic predisposition to being really good at endurance sports. So I think yes, you can train sparingly, but then what we do need to factor in is your intensity. So if you can't train very much, intensity has to go up. However, saying that, the volume, the sort of marathon performance of getting to the end of the marathon in a time that you like the look of or feel of, that has a high correlation to distance training. So how much volume you've accumulated. But again, I think that's because the fastest runners all do the same bloody program. So I think there's a little bit of a balancing act there between how much are they going to do versus how intensive they go.
Yeah.
Optimizing training intensities is a big thing, and I do believe you can get away with doing a bit less for sure. The long run, though, is something that probably is the most specific sort of training that you can do for the marathon and up. This is a marathon distance. And then as you go further up into the ultra marathons, the limiting factor isn't really fitness. It's not how cardiovascularly competent you are. There is a little bit of the muscular side of things, like the damage that you accumulate. There's definitely something there. But there is so much more psychological stuff that goes on in those longer races that is going to inhibit your performance more than your VO2 max and your interval speeds. So, and the logistics of eating as well, like we've discussed, there's within that as well. Within that question, there was a question on food. That is a huge part of going further. Even the marathon distance is a huge part, but going further than that becomes even more of a big part. Because if you can't get the fuel in, the engine's not going to turn over. So I think we can train with less time. We can focus on other things like eating. And we have discussed that with yourself recently as well. And then the time commitment part is you just got to do with what you can. Don't pressure yourself on, oh, I haven't got enough time, therefore I won't do it. It's do what you can with what you have.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's very true. I guess my angle, or slightly my angles to answer this question is slightly different, and knowing Rach, I can target it a bit more specifically. I think, yeah, I think there's a common misconception everywhere rather. If you're doing a park run, you're doing this much a week. If you're doing a marathon, you're doing this much. And if you're doing an ultra, oh my gosh, that's like 4 marathons. Therefore, it's 4 times. That's just simply not the case in terms of training volume. I mean, it's not that wouldn't it just simply wouldn't be possible unless I guess maybe some professional, if your only job is running. But I think certainly with ultras and the longer run, I think the bit that I've talked about it before and I've mentioned before, but I think the thing that's very interesting is when you look at the really long runs, longer than the ones I'm talking about, so kind of 200 plus miles, Cocodona 250, like these really, really long runs. The thing that is interesting to me in that is that men and women finish, the winner, you won't be able to predict the winner, i.e., it won't always be a man winning and in those runs. Now, if it's a 100-meter sprint, the men's time is always going to be quicker than the women's time because it's a much more physical it's purely physical. In these really long ultras, there's this massive mental element that comes in. And I think this is partly the bit that's lost perhaps in some of the kind of and training and time conversation, is that actually running 100 miles, as you've said, the training, I guess if I was trying to run a faster marathon, the training plan would look similar. It wouldn't be like a quarter the amount or whatever. So there's a massive mental element to these long runs. And so actually in the training, a lot of it is, a part of it is also training that kind of mental element, because that's what's going to make a difference in those longer runs. So as the race goes up, or the race distance goes up, the training in my eyes doesn't change sort of hugely. It definitely changes, but there's this mental bit that happens. And I think that's kind of demonstrated to a point by the fact that at the longest runs, men and women compete side by side, which is telling you something, that it's becoming less physical. I don't think it sounds silly to say it's less physical running 250 miles, right? It's clearly physical, but there's a kind of the mental element becomes more paramount, perhaps. So I think that's one part of it. So overall, I think that the amount of time is probably, inverted commas, not as much as you think. I guess my message on that is that people can do this stuff with less. They kind of, the limiting factor is actually probably not their time. It's probably just an acknowledgement of giving it a try and getting out there and trying it. In terms of balancing, I don't think I'm not sure I'm the right person to answer that, because I don't think I balance it all. For me, balance is I'm balanced when I'm swinging from like wildly from one side to the other. I hit balance in the middle for like a millisecond, and then I go to the other end. But I guess that's part of the thing. For me, I guess it's definitely these rest days, and we talked about that more specifically in rest weeks and stuff last week or the week before. But that the mindset of pushing forward is really hard to reconcile with the mindset to rest, for sure. But it's clearly a big part of it. And I think that having that, giving yourself permission to have those rest days and have those time, that sort of time out does help. I'm not saying it's particularly easy. And that falls into the kind of latter part of the question around kind of nutrition and recovery. And I think sleep is probably one of the most under becoming more acknowledged, but probably not very well acknowledged as like a massive impact to recovery and performance. And it's something I'm pretty religious on, in terms of, or try to be anyway, making sure I get good sleep and don't kind of fritter away in the evenings. And yeah, like nutrition, like I guess there's two parts to that, isn't there? There's the kind of race day nutrition, and the consumption, trying to get stuff into you. And then the rest of the time, I guess I spend a lot of time on my kind of diet. I cook everything. It's all plant-based. It's all, trying to kind of have a sort of highly, lots of variety in the diet, but it's lots of vegetables, lots of grains, lots of pulses and all that sort of stuff. Do I get it all right all the time? Absolutely not. Am I better than I was years ago? Yes, and it's a bit of an evolving beast. But I think we've touched on this before. It's like it is hard when you have family, work, and big goals, and how you balance that. I don't know if there's a perfect answer to it, but it's definitely something I guess you have to compromise some stuff, and getting up early is definitely one of those items, and fitting those runs in when you've come back from a day away and it's dark and raining. I feel like for me, those runs are like the double bonus, because they're mentally that much harder. And I kind of think, right, here's the the extra mental effort is the real bonus for this part.
There's kind of like two parts to that. Yeah, there's two parts to that I would love to pick up on. And what the second one is actually that we'll do first, and that's that the mental strain of your day has a huge impact on your performance on the run. So you got a really stressful job or family life, and you're absolutely shattered by the end of the day. Mentally, you're drawn out. You haven't done anything physical, but mentally, you're just about to collapse. By going out and doing that session, obviously, maybe you have to adjust the intensity a little bit to make it easier because you have had a big day. But that in its own is a training stress. And when it's tapering week or you're on like race day, you won't have that stress because it will be somewhere else. Therefore, you'll have a greater performance on race day just purely from
You
that.
hope it's somewhere else.
Yeah. Maybe it's followed you. It's just carrying your bag for you. But the biggest part of it is stress, and you need to both work with it and also recover from it. So if you had a really, even this period of your life where it's really stressful, you're going to have to factor that into your training and adjust for it, but also realize that it is going to also add to it as well. So if you're going to put numbers on it, say, for example, you have that 5K run that's supposed to be easy. Well, by having a really hard day, that same run for your body now feels like 8 or 10K. And that's the amount of training load you've actually put on yourself. Not saying those are the exact numbers, but just to kind of highlight it for people that you can use that sometimes and be like, okay, well, that's how some people do train for these longer endurance events. It's actually some more mental training. And there was a really great study by Samuel McCullough, I believe his second name was. It was written in the book that Alex Hutchinson wrote called Endure. And Samuel McCullough, he did a study where they did gamification apps. So you, I think called a Stroop test. The word says blue, but it's written in red, and you have to tap red and not blue. And you do that over and over again. It's challenging the reconciliation of part of your brain to go, oh, it says that, but it is that color, therefore it is this. You're arguing with yourself all the time. Very tiring, very cognitively stressful. They did that for 20 minutes before a cycling time trial. And then they did the time trial again post not doing that sort of training. After doing that mental training, the time trial was much slower. They weren't able to perform as well because their brain was tired. Your brain sends the signals for every muscle contraction that you're going to do on that long run. So if your brain's tired, the signals aren't going to go as fast.
Well, we touched on that last time with the kind of whole rest week and the mentality of like, I was doing half the amount, but I felt like it was harder. And it's like the brain has somewhere said, you're knackered, or you should be knackered, or I'm fixing you, or whatever the hell it was. But it was like not working.
And
Yeah,
the second point was on the long distance racing side of things. Is the data is definitely suggesting that there's a narrowing of that. And the annoying thing about data is obviously it's based on whoever participates. And we probably get a much larger proportion of men participating in those longer distances than women. That is subtly changing. But the women who do those races are freaking amazing. And that's kind of where it does skew the data slightly. So the average participant on both sides is a little bit low, a little bit high, but it's great.
Yeah. And I think I guess to me, that's like a really, to go back to the question, that example of like Cocodona or something, 250-mile run, that's a race. And I don't know I can't remember who won this year, but like the fastest woman and man will change positions through that run. It's kind of harking back to this, like these ultras are mental. And the whole, we talk about the rest days and the stress. Well, if you can manage that, if you can get yourself mentally ready, your best chance of your body, because you're racing it at an intensity that, in theory, at least, is within you're below the threshold at which you can carry on running, right? My whatever pace I'll do Daytona, in theory in the lab, I could keep doing forever as long as I was putting fuel in and the rest of it. It's not a physical limitation. It's so then you're into like, what does your brain tell your body and all that sort of stuff. And therefore that's where the kind of, different. And if you look at the fastest, I mean, to us now, some of the ultras, people are running them like so insanely fast. It's kind of terrifying, but actually you look most of the thing, the pace is not that high. So the limiting factor or the limitation is not the physical. As long as you keep fueling the body, the limitation is not the kind of physical part of it necessarily. I think.
Yeah, we've got this sort of
breakdown of muscle and all the rest of it.
Yeah, we've got this sort of dual fatigue theory at the minute, and I'm sure it's moved on since then. But simplistically speaking, and to oversimplify things, which is usually dangerous, is we've got the central fatigue system, which is the neural sort of system from the brain stem, brain itself, into then the nerve endings going to the muscle. And we've got then the peripheral fatigue system, which is then the muscles and the joints and the bones and those things. And I think there is a huge history of work done on the peripheral, like muscle fatigue and sort of the VO2 systems, the pulmonary heart delivery of blood, that kind of thing. And it's only really just starting to get into the neural side of things, that central fatigue where the brain's getting tired. And as you kind of pointed out, the 200-kilometer race is at a pace that, technically speaking, should be able to be held forever, but they don't. They reach that finish line exhausted. So what is fatiguing? What is their measurement of fatigue? And then one of the ideas is that it's this central fatigue, where basically the brain's getting tired. I've been involved in the study, and we've done studies on a thing called TMS, transcranial magnetic stimulation. And you basically put a large magnet on someone's head, and you put it on the motor cortex, and you shoot an electrical pulse down through the brain, and it goes to wherever part of the brain you hit will stimulate part of the muscular system. So we'll aim for the quad, for example, on the left leg. So we'll go, okay, right side of the temporal, right side of the motor cortex, or somewhere around kind of where you would scratch your head if you were thinking about something, and then shoot the magnetic stimulus, boom, you then get the quad to actually contract. We can measure then what they are going to push themselves. So you can go, okay, push into that dynamometer or that stress measurer as hard as you can. Go, push, 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 push. Okay, relax. Now do it again, and I'll shoot you in the head with this magnetic stimulus. And what we see when you're looking at the dynamometer is you'll see the power output goes up. It flatlines when they're pushing maximally. And there's a little boop, little dip, a little blip of what was left in the tank from a neural perspective. And what we found was, sounds dipping off, but what we found was that as you basically push hard and are in this fatigued state, is that if the blip is relatively small, then it wasn't the muscular system, it wasn't the peripheral system that was fatigued. But if the blip was quite big, so you were pushing really hard and there's suddenly a massive spike that was left in the tank, that shows that actually that was more peripheral fatigue. Your muscle was tired, it couldn't produce the force. The first one, the brain was tired and not wanting to give it everything.
Yeah. Well, and I think, I think maybe whenever before we talked about that, when you get to halfway in a run, you feel, okay, now it's easier. Well, halfway in today's run could be the full duration of yesterday's run. It's completely arbitrary madness of the brain. Like there's nothing, and you have it as well. Like I remember on a really long run, like a 100-mile race, 100K race or something, you will approach the finish line and you'll be running in the, loosest stumbling forwards. And you stop, and then the journey from the finish line to like a chair is like some insurmountable difference. Whereas a minute ago, you were running, and if the finish line had been, probably if no one had told you, 500 meters further down the line, you would have carried on. But suddenly this 10 meters is impossible. So there's a load going on there that is far from logical.
Yeah. I really recommend the book Endure by Alex Hutchinson. I really recommend it because it goes into a lot of this stuff around technically speaking, if they collapse at the end of the run, they shouldn't be able to have gone any faster, yet they get up again. They look like they should have died. That's technically what the system's on such high alert. They should have collapsed and died, but they don't. They get up and then they're back to normal again. They're walking around the following day and so on. So what's making them tired? If they could have done more. So it's the idea that the brain is a limiter in itself. The brain will always protect, and it will always inhibit, and it will always doubt in order to stave life, to keep life going.
Yeah, and I think we could go on for hours here. We need to be careful. And I think that's one of the things I've noticed in kind of ultras is I make a point of like fueling to keep my brain going. Like I know I'm probably not burning, I don't know whatever. Burning probably a lot of fat as a fuel source and some carbs, but I feel like if your blood sugar sort of drops, your brain, you're not fueling your brain. If you're not fueling your brain, suddenly the everything unravels. Whether that's right or wrong, that's certainly kind of perceptually, I feel like, okay, I've got to keep doing this. If I want brain to be thinking properly, if my brain is thinking properly, my decision making process, my ability to kind of, you know, this small obstacle I can tackle versus this small obstacle is like a mental spiral, and before you know it, you're done. And that's back, I guess, slightly to the question, which was to do with fitting all this in with life and stuff. Is like I see a lot of my training sessions and this kind of the stress of everything else as being kind of training sort of those pathways. Like I will get up and I will do this session and I will fit it in before such and such, or I will go out in the evening to make sure it happens. Like you say, that mental, the kind of mental element to that is a training, is a kind of training stress and a thing that you're trying to teach. And I guess that, you know, to a point and I'll say it in my internal dialogue, it's like, it's kind of like the bad water way. Like, am I prepared to do these things? If I don't answer yes, not every day, you know, like some days is just going out and it's not so hard, you know. But if I don't ask myself that question and say a kind of resounding yes, when I come to line up on the start line, I haven't got the reasons why. You know, you've not built all those little chips in the, whatever you want to call it, you know, tokens in the jar or whatever. You
Hmm.
haven't built that up, so you haven't got that reserve to say, yeah, that's how I can get over this hill, or that's how I can get over this hurdle. So that I think is where the training, that kind of training element really comes in. It's like, it's all that stuff. And, you know, and I think the other bit is like, I didn't just get up one day. Well, I did get up one day and run 100 kilometers, but it was ugly as hell. Like, but you don't just start out and say, I'm just gonna run like this. Like, it's a journey, and you get there by stacking all this stuff up over time. And, you know, it's years and years of in training that makes you know you can turn up on the line and do it. It's not, you know, oh, just have a go today. You know, there's a kind of background. And I think it is that mental bit. It's like being able to ask the question and to know you can do it. So
Well, I think that kind of neatly brings us on to like the a lot of the time, people who would like to achieve something don't necessarily know what they want to achieve, therefore haven't got the reason why to do it, to go out there and do it. Yeah, the general health and fitness is not a strong enough reason to get up at 5 in the morning and go out for a run before your kids are up and have to be at school. But to get on that start line for a big race, that's, you know, the hardest race on earth, and that's constantly going to be playing away at that little mind going, oh, God, if I don't do this, I'm not going to be ready. That's why I think the marathon is such an incredible thing to eventually aim for if you want to. Obviously, the 5K can we give that same thing, right? Mo Farah built a whole career on the 5 and 10,000 meters, so you don't have to go on to do the marathon. But the biggest part of it really is, how much do you want it? If you don't want it very much, you're not going to go out there and get it.
yeah.
And the general public are not really taught how to set goals. They're not really taught to really actually achieve them in some fashion. It's always like, oh, well, there's plenty more. uh,
Yeah, yeah.
but a lot of the time, actually, the reasons why you should go out for that run is just not to die early. Really, that's the crux of it is, you know, giving yourself the health and the well-being that you get from training isn't a strong enough pull. So we need to work on that.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's, you know, lots of people ask me, oh, how do you do it? And I'm like, well, you just get on with it. Like, don't, you know, just start, and then, you know, by all means set a crazy goal, but but don't wait. Like, that's the big thing, is like, don't wait until you're ready. Like, get started and get on, because, you know, you, otherwise, just the only thing that you definitely know is you're a day later. You know,
Yeah.
you've missed one opportunity, or you missed two opportunities, you missed a week. So um yeah, I think, well, we could bang on all day about this. We'll
Yeah.
have to, we'll prompt another question, and we'll dive into some more specifics on it again. But I think
Well, I can't
yeah,
remember, just to finish,
the
one little quote
general,
to finish. I can't remember who
yeah,
said it, but it was the best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago. The second best time is now.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think that's the bit about all this endurance stuff is, you know, we're talking about the details of like intervals and this, that, and the other. That's fine, that's great, you know, that's all great. But I mean, I've been running for a really long time now, so those things become really relevant. But if it was like day one, the most important thing to do is put a pair of trainers on and get outside. It doesn't matter if you it doesn't even matter what you do, just get on with it, and then build from that, and then add in and add in and add in and build up from there. But I think, yeah, it's like, well, what trainers do I need, or what watch do I need, or what, and I love trainers and I love a new watch, right?
Yeah.
You don't need them, although they are, maybe the justification of a new watch is the goal for people, and then they'll get out and do it. But
Yeah.
we'll see.
Well, probably the biggest amount of people that we get in coming to us for coaching is the people who haven't actually done anything and they want to aim for something. They want to do their first marathon, or they want to improve their 5K time a little bit, but they're not wanting to achieve anything like insane. Uh, but that's ultimately where people should probably get the most education. And that's ultimately what it is. It's like, okay, getting out there, get it done, but also learn about how to do it. Learn about your body, learn about all these things, because then it's going to help you with fueling, it's going to help you with recovery, it's going to help you with this. Get out there and get some help. The two things that you can
Yeah,
do really easily. Get
yeah.
some help and get out there and do it.
The bit of Rachel's question that we've definitely failed to answer is how to balance everything. But I haven't worked it out yet. I don't know how to do
It's a
it.
fallacy.
I'm
It's an
absolutely
absolute fallacy.
hopeful.
There is no
Yeah,
balance.
I'm either basically I only ever think I've kind of spinning all the plates when I've just not seen one that I've dropped. So um,
What
it's
was that noise? Oh,
it's
anyway.
work in progress. I think is probably the reality. So once I come up with an answer, we'll re-ask the question. But for now, it's a case of just try just try not to drop the ball too often. Yeah, and a decent sleep in the meantime helps you keep tackling it all.
Yeah, and I think that's the stress resilience is the only way to balance it, is prepare yourself for failure in some fashion. You're going to fail at something, and failure is not a bad thing. And the failure that we want to experience is not injury and illness. That's the one we don't want to experience. But I'm a big firm believer that there is no such thing as balance. We're taught this idea that actually you can do everything when actually you can't. Like you've only got a finite amount of resources and mental capacity, and therefore something has to drop. And it's just the way of life. And what things are you willing to drop in order to achieve something you want to achieve?
Failure as a motivator one other time, because
Yeah.
I absolutely, I think it's the big, for me, that's, I can think back, it's not this race, the race the year before when we lost was one of the biggest motivators, and fundamentally changed the kind of direction of how I tackled stuff. So um we can tackle that another time. But
Oh, that's
I
a
think
nice
for
hook.
now, our conclusion is we're both pretty unbalanced, and maybe everyone is. They're just kidding themselves if they say they are. And eat well and sleep well, and then get your trainers on.
Yeah, exactly that. Exactly that. Do with what you can with what you can.
Very good. All right, Fletch. Well, we will catch up next week. And in the
Definitely.
meantime, I'll enjoy the 8-minute intervals later, because I think you've alluded to the fact they're going to become 32-minute intervals at some point.
16. 16. We'll go to
Yeah,
32 this
okay.
year.
Okay. Oh, very good. Yeah, very good. All
One
right.
day.
Good stuff. All right. Catch you later.
Cheers.
Bye bye.